Most of the noise today around AI and mathematics is about what machines can do. I think the more interesting question is what happens to mathematics itself as these tools get good enough to actually collaborate with us. How does research shift? How does teaching shift? Few people have thought about these questions as carefully as my wonderful guest today, Alex. Welcome, Alex. Alex is a distinguished professor of mathematics at Rutgers and an analytic number theorist whose work with the late Jean Bourgain produced breakthrough results in Apollonian circle packings. He sits on the strategic board of the Lean FRO, led the Prime Number Theorem Plus project with Terry Tao, and his recent paper, The Shape of Math to Come, has become one of the most widely discussed pieces of writing on where mathematics research is heading. So really excited to have you on with us today, Alex. Welcome.
Thank you. Yeah, thanks for having me.
Just to get us going, I guess it would be really good to understand what drew you to mathematics in the first place. I'm guessing in your teens, and what still keeps you excited about mathematics today, 20, 25 years later?
Yeah, what drew me to math in the first place? I mean, I was born in Russia, and we came to the U.S. and I showed up in school. I was in third grade or something, and there were all these foreign symbols in every class until we got to math class, and then everything was a few years behind where we were in the Russian curriculum. So math was always easy. I mean, my mom's also a mathematician, and so she would always play games with us, and math was sort of the only thing I ever. Well, that's not true. I there are other things I enjoyed or had some potential in, perhaps, but I went to college thinking I'd be a math major, and then I went to a PhD program thinking I'd be a mathematician. Then I'm very lucky that I got to keep doing this. I've never had a job in my life, kind of thing. I just keep playing games, and for some reason it keeps working out.
Do you remember that first, maybe it was as a teenager, maybe it was in your PhD, but the first problem that you really got that, like, is that dopamine hit where you're like, this is what it's all about? Do you remember that very first one, or is it
I
been so many
do
along the way?
actually. No,
What was
I
it?
mean, I remember the first experience where I was like on a high and I couldn't go to sleep and I just had to keep computing and I couldn't wait for the next morning so I could run into. This was something that it was something very silly actually. I think my buddy Sam Payne and I was probably a freshman or sophomore in college, and there was no, it must have been freshman year of college, and I was taking a course by John Conway, who's a very famous mathematician. He was at Princeton. He passed away, and he explained some sequence to us in class, and then I thought of an alternate way of understanding that sequence, and I just started playing with it and playing with it and playing with it, and I kept thinking I was discovering all kinds of crazy new things. And then the next morning I couldn't wait to show it to him, and I showed it to him, and he thought it was, moderately interesting, and I never wrote it up or anything. It was just some silly bit of undergraduate research, but it was the first time where I had that feeling of I'm seeing something that no human being has ever, to my knowledge, observed before, and it's like you're standing on this frontier out in space, and it's a really cool feeling to look out and then be able to tell somebody what you've discovered, and hear if they find it as captivating as it is to you. I don't know why certain patterns grip human beings, but we're just wired to be curious about things, and we're creatures of pattern matching. And well, AI is also very good at pattern matching.
Yes, it is indeed. I guess obviously education is close to your heart, and you've never really left it in some ways, right? In different forms. But you also lead the Rutgers Math Corps, which is a non-profit for young high school kids. What drew you to that, and is that another just you really see a gap in how people are taught today, or it's just an interest you have in trying to kind of pass it on?
Yeah, that was something I never. That was not something I anticipated would be happening to my life. I never thought of myself. It's actually middle and high school math summer program. I never thought of myself as running a middle school summer camp. What happened was just a few years ago, I was talking to a friend of mine named Sarah Cook, who teaches at Michigan, And she told me about this incredible program that was started in Detroit 30 plus years ago and was amazingly successful at taking kids in school districts where, there are very few kids that are getting what all kids should be getting. And here she was in a fancy research university down the street from kids who can't add fractions, and that's not right, and she should do something about that. And she was telling me what a meaningful experience it was running the program, this branch of the original Math Corps program at Michigan. And anyway, this was just a casual conversation we were having about something else, and I was really struck by it, and I looked up what the New Brunswick, Rutgers is in New Brunswick, New Jersey, and I looked up what the proficiency rates are in the school down the street from me, and it's something like fewer than 10% of kids in 8th grade and 12th grade, whatever grade you measure, fewer than the New Jersey Department of Education sort of tests them every year, and posts a little meter of 100% proficient, 70% proficient, whatever. And once it gets to 10%, it doesn't go below 10%. It just says fewer than 10. It doesn't give you a number. And that's what New Brunswick was. And I was just like, what the hell is going on? This is not okay. And totally on a lark. At the time, I was submitting my next NSF. This is the National Science Foundation. Every 3 or every 5 years, I put in a grant proposal. They give me some money to do some research. I can pay some graduate students, postdocs, that kind of thing. Travel to conferences, whatever. Completely standard thing. And I happened to be writing my next grant around this same time. And I thought, what are the chances they'll give me some money to run this kind of camp at Rutgers, bring this program to Rutgers? And I put it in. And I forgot all about it. And 9 months later, you hear from the foundation, and they said, okay, here's the money. And it's like, oh crap, what have I done? Now I have to run a middle school summer camp. I don't know the first thing about this. And so I got together with some colleagues, and I found some amazing teachers nearby. And then we admitted the first crop of high schoolers and middle schoolers and so on. And the first summer was every bit as meaningful as Sarah had promised it would be. And now we've done 2 summers worth, and we're still fundraising for summer 3, and we're a good chunk of the way there. But yeah, so that's, this program, I mean, I don't know how much you want to go into this, but it completely blew open my understanding. It's not like I follow what's happening in K-12 education. I have my own kids going through the K-12 education system, and they're at a fantastic school, and I just immediately realized that whatever they were going to offer them for math was going to be insufficient, because for some reason we have this idea that kids need to go really, really slowly. And if you... I had a teacher once where I casually explained, I try to basically avoid the school system as far as math is concerned. I just have kind of given up on it and do whatever the teachers want you to do in school. Yes, sir. Yes, ma'am. Hand in whatever homework. Keep your mouth shut. Come home, and then we'll do some actual math that will interest you and challenge you and so on. And at some point, a teacher found out that, I don't know, my, at the time, 5th grader was doing whatever, trig or something, or pre-calculus, and said to me, what's the rush? Are you in a hurry or something? And I didn't say anything. But I thought about it later, and not a single one of my kids' soccer coaches ever said, why are they drilling all afternoon? What's the rush? You're trying to become Messi? Not a single piano teacher ever said, why are you practicing 3 hours a day? Like, what are you trying to become? What, you trying to do something? What's the problem? What's the rush? I was like, what the hell is wrong with people? Are you kidding me? Like, just give kids what they need and let them proceed through the program at whatever pace is right for them. I'm not saying every kid needs to be taking calculus in the 3rd grade, but there's so much potential and talent that we as a country and as a world, I think, are leaving on the table. And I actually think that Math Corps, I mean, I really stumbled into the Math Corps, but now that I've seen it in practice and on the ground, and I see what's actually happening between these high schoolers, the premise is people need to get, a high school degree, and then they go and they get an undergraduate degree in education, and then they go and get a master's degree, and then they continue all this thing, and then they can start working in the classrooms. And we have high schoolers teaching middle schoolers. That's who our teachers are. It's the high schoolers. So when someone says, oh, if you don't have a master's, oh, you don't have a bachelor's, these guys don't have a high school diploma, okay? And they're the best teachers possible, because we have 10th graders teaching 7th graders. And those 10th graders, now the high school kids, we take the best kids around. They have to be really, really strong at math. There's a whole training program. We have our whole values. The Math Corps is actually, it's not a math program at all. It's a values program. It's a program that teaches, what is the greatest thing within you? Every single person has greatness within them. That's just an axiom of the program. And given that axiom, how do you bring out the best of what everybody has? Whether it's a 7th grader who's learning how to add fractions or an 8th grader who's doing calculus, we don't care where you are in your progression. We are going to take you from where you are, and we'll do the obvious thing. And the obvious thing is private tutoring. And the only problem with private tutoring is it's expensive. Well, there's two things. There's private tutoring with someone who knows a lot more math than what you're trying to learn right now. It's someone who's like 3 or 4 grade levels above and really knows the subject cold. So those are the only 2 ingredients. That and someone who, can actually talk to kids and have a modicum of appreciation. And we have kids who come in and they take our pre-test, and they're basically what we would say is a 5th grade level. Like they can't solve, most of the problems in the 7th grade. And I feel silly saying this because I wouldn't believe it if I didn't live it, but in 4 weeks, they come out and they've learned all of 7th grade and a little bit of 8th grade math. And like, what do you mean? How could you do four grades of mathematics in 4 weeks? It's not possible. The reason they test at a 5th grade level is because their understanding of mathematics is this spaghetti, like Swiss cheese. Yeah. It's not that they don't know 7th grade math. It's that they're tiny little bits that are missing from their understanding of mathematics, that if you just filled in these little gaps, everything else comes together. And so anyway, I'm probably going on too much about this program for what you...
It's interesting. It's interesting, and I guess the takeaway is it's like there's challenges with the syllabus itself, right? And I don't know if you can fix it, but you're starting with unlocking the talent, the potential these kids have by kind of filling the gaps, right, or connecting the dots in some of these areas.
It's just the solution is so obvious: private tutoring, individualized tutoring. Give every kid. Not an AI, so this is a really important thing. Yes to AI, 100% to AI in the back of the house. AI should be following the kid's trajectory, following the dependency graph of their knowledge and understanding, and mapping out where the boundary is and knowing what exercise they need to be doing today. Then we print that out and we hand it to a high schooler. And the high schooler goes and delivers that content. Education is about community, and it's about relationships. And that's not an iPad in front of a kid's face.
Yeah, so I saw you reposted the piece about Norway, right, where they introduced iPads. Was it 5 years ago or 10 years ago? And then there's been a complete unwind of it, and I think kids are better off for it, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. Technology is amazing for education because it can individualize. Like, no teacher is going to sit there for 30 kids and figure out, okay, Jimmy needs to learn this little thing tomorrow, but Tommy needs to learn that. It's just impossible, impractical. But what the Math Corps does is it distributes teachers at a very, very low cost. We cost about a third of what the public school pays for that 1 month of the camp. So AI solves the coordination problem, and then human beings delivering it solve the fact that education is relationships.
Yeah, agreed. There's
anyway.
It's trying to find the right balance, right? Anyway, changing tact a little bit. Are you still taking a course today? I wasn't sure. Are you still teaching in Rutgers today? And I guess to the extent of going from 7th graders to university students. Are you live with courses? Yeah, you're still teaching.
So I'm teaching. Yeah, I'm teaching. This semester, I'm teaching a graduate topics course. So these are 3rd and 4th year PhD students.
So I guess my question was sort of related to the last point. Is like, so you've seen the arc, right, from no AI to a little bit of AI to students are turbocharged with AI. How are you finding it in the classrooms that you're taking today, and how are you managing that? AI to coordinate, but maybe not to learn.
Yeah, so at the graduate level, AI doesn't help me all that much, although I would imagine it would be a huge help to our students, because let's say I mention some offhand thing in lecture and they write down, the term, but they don't actually know where it is. I didn't say look it up in this book. I didn't say go read this paper. They can go to GPT and say, can you just explain this to me? And it'll explain. It won't be right. It won't be, but it'll at least give some pointers. And as a mathematician, if someone presents you with a calculation and the calculation is wrong, but the idea of doing that calculation is the right idea, which is the pattern that it can match, then you can finish the calculation on your own. It's just like knowing where to look and how to set it up and so on. AI is amazing for that. So now with undergrads, it's a completely different story, because undergrads, if they're taking calculus, they're probably not taking calculus because they want to be math professors. They in some sense they're forced to be there. That's right. It's not quite like middle schoolers who are literally forced to be in middle school, or else they get in big trouble. The college students have chosen to go to college. They've chosen to major in whatever major they want, and that major is, they want to be a biologist or something, and they have to take Calc 1 because it's a prerequisite for no good reason but gatekeeping for the biology classes that they want to take. That's not up to us. We just provide the course, whatever it is. The other departments want to use us as a sieve for their students. So be it. But to the extent that what students are supposed to be learning, I try to impart on them, especially maybe not in Calc 1 where it's really they just want to be out of the class. They don't want to learn anything. And so if AI is going to help them finish their homework and speed through, and maybe they get a C on the final and they never see a derivative again, I'm sorry that you're in this class in the first place. I wish your department would not use us as gatekeepers, but whatever. But the students who are taking, a slightly higher level math class where maybe it's related to, maybe they want to be engineers, maybe they want to be something else. For them, I say, look, what are you trying to get out of this class? You should always, whenever you're doing something, you should understand what the goal of that thing is. And I give the analogy of 3 ways you might interact with technology in the physical world. I had a delivery today. The guy had a forklift. He took this forklift, drove it out of his truck, drove it into my garage. End of story. He's done. So if you're trying to lift a heavy pallet and move it somewhere, you take a forklift. You don't. Obviously, we're not doing this by hand. So that's like type 1. Type 2 is you want to learn how to operate a forklift. So it's not that you're moving pallets because the pallet needs to go from point A to point B. The point of moving the pallet is to learn how to use a forklift, to be efficient at this and be able to execute it in a variety of contexts. Fine. That's type 2. Type 3 is you say you want to work out, and so you go to the gym and you load up 200 pounds on the bench press, and then you go drive over your forklift and do your reps. Like, that's type 3. Okay, that is not an appropriate use of the forklift. Type 1 is appropriate because you're trying to do something. Type 2 is appropriate because you're trying to learn something. Type 3, what the hell are you doing putting a forklift in this, right? So in the same exact way, if I have a PhD student doing their research, that's type 1. No holds bar. Use as much AI as you possibly can. Learn how to prove this theorem. I think the standard for what constitutes a math PhD is only going to rise with the availability of technology that allows people to produce much more mathematics than they previously could. If that's type 1. Type 2, if you're taking a course that teaches you efficient ways of interacting with AI, with formalization, with a good ways of prompting and so on, great, use AI. Type 3 is you're taking a calculus class or something, and you're going to use AI to solve your calculus problems. That's having a forklift lift your bench press. The whole purpose of why you're there is to get your brain to be stronger, not to solve a calculus integral, which, by the way, for 20 years now, you could have gone on wolframalpha.com and had it solve the calculus integral. Like, that's not why you're here.
Yeah, maybe some short-termism in the minds of some of these young people.
But when you remind them, they appreciate the distinction. Their time, as much as they might not appreciate their time because they think they have infinite amounts of it, when you point out to them, okay, given that you're here, how do you make the best of the situation? And what you're trying to learn when you take a hard math class is how to think. And you're trying to train your brain to think as hard as you can about the hardest things it can handle. And that's the analog of putting your body through CrossFit or whatever, right? Yeah. So as long as they understand that, sometimes that, yeah. for a week they do their own homework and then they start using AI. I don't know.
That makes sense. And I guess when you think about, I like in the context of technology, etc., changing how we learn at high school level, undergrad and graduate level, you've also got this backdrop of, I wonder, from your perspective, has this changed how your students 5 years ago thought about moving from undergraduate to graduate maths? And there's this whole other thing about existential maths now, given we have AI and technology getting more powerful. How's that specific piece like changed, or how are you thinking about that as someone who's a mentor to 20 plus PhD students over your time? Is that a difficult question for you to answer now, or how are you approaching it when you do get those questions from students looking to progress potentially versus take a big cushy job at one of the big AI labs?
Yeah, well, let me separate several things. So one is what's happening with students progressing from through the various stages, and I think that AI, as long as it's being used in the correct way, namely, if you use AI to plan out what the right amount of benching you should do and how many times you should go a week and so on, AI can help with that and can really, but you still have to go into the weight room and lift it yourself, right? So in the same way, AI can greatly help people understand what they're learning if they didn't understand the argument that the professor was giving on the blackboard. If they read in the textbook and they still don't understand, they have an infinitely patient resource that will just sit there and answer. They can ask the most basic questions and it'll answer it at whatever level. You say, no, I still don't understand. Can you tell it to me like what does that word mean? You can ask really, really basic questions of this thing and iterate with it as much as you want. If you're using it like that and you're understanding the material better, that's going to supercharge the availability of deep mathematical knowledge to a much wider base of people than previously had access to that kind of thing. It used to be you had to go to office hours, on the rare occasion that an undergrad would get the muster up the courage. Exactly. So there's no longer a big scary professor in front of you. It's just a little chat bot, and you can have a nice conversation and learn an awful lot. In terms of what students are doing for their careers, at any PhD granting institution, the reality is always that as a country, we graduate something like 1,000 math PhDs a year, and then there's maybe, 300 postdocs available, and of those 300 postdocs, 3 years later are vying for one of 100 tenure track jobs. So there was always a sieve. The question is, is that right or wrong? Some of my colleagues say we should be graduating many fewer PhD students, given how many fewer tenured lines there are waiting for them. I strongly disagree with that. I think that the value of a math PhD education is the math PhD education and not the potential to become a professor afterwards. In the same way that I think, why do you want your body to be strong? You think you'll have a better life as a result. And so the fact that, the vast majority, even at the top places, the vast majority of students are going to not stay in academia. That's perfectly fine with me. Yeah. And I think that training is valuable in whatever they end up doing. So
it's the journey versus the destination, right?
It's the journey versus... Exactly. So the fact that now people have even more access to job prospects after they finish whether an undergrad or a PhD, because now there's a whole new class of people who are gobbling up people with mathematical talent called AI startups, which didn't exist 5 years ago. They weren't hiring mathematicians 5 years ago. The fact that there's one more avenue for people to get a career other than academia, I'm all for it.
It's a good thing, right?
Yeah.
That makes sense. Changing slightly tact, I saw in January you published a really interesting paper on, as part of your role with the Association for Mathematical Research, around diamond access journals. So I thought that was really interesting. We've been speaking to various academics in Ireland where we're based, and time and time again, there's frustration with the publication process, charging for access to journals they've published themselves. So I think this is a problem you're very you relate very strongly to. I guess firstly, what drew you to this, like the notion of these journals monetizing academics' work versus building what is essentially a prototype or a system that allows you to launch a journal for $3,000 a year. I think, is it your own research, over the years that brought this problem to light to you? That's the first question. The second question, what prompted you to build this, really efficient, lightweight system?
Yeah, it's not something that I could say I cared about more than 10 years ago, but the commercial publishers played an extremely important role until, I would say, the turn of the millennium in being able to aggregate quality science and distribute it. Right, the way that I was not. I mean, I'm not that old, but I still remember going to a library and pulling the journal off the shelf and flipping through, and actually you would often run into a paper that you weren't looking for that was completely unrelated to the one that you were, you happened to thumb past it, and then you look at it and you say, oh my God, this is fascinating. I didn't know this existed, and this is actually exactly what I need, not for this problem, but for this completely other problem that I'm working on. So I think we're missing something by not having those serendipitous interactions with, you just Google it, you get it.
The randomness, right?
Exactly. But anyway, so commercial publishers played an extremely important role in getting us to the point that we're at now. So I don't want to, just say, oh, they're evil corporations or something like that. Not at all. They played an important role. They're continuing to play that role because we're allowing them to continue to play that role. But the reality is we no longer need them for distribution. We have the archive. Now, the archive doesn't solve all of our problems because first of all, the archive is just anything goes up there. It's not refereed. And the other thing that journals do several things. One, they referee to the extent that they referee. Some are better than others. Two is there are people on the board who need to be big name people who then say this work is quality work. If you have people saying this is quality work, but you don't trust the quality of the people saying it, that's something. So it's basically you get some fancy names on an editorial board, and you go through a refereeing process, and that's a journal. So why does that cost anything? Why isn't that just somebody's website, just posting PDFs up there? Well, there's a very good reason why not that. In fact, several reasons. One is that when you have fancy people on a board, the most important thing to protect is their time. And so there's always a cost. The cost, if you're running it, bare hands with HTML, is the time of the individuals involved. And so the way one of the by far the largest expenses that we pay is for editorial management software. That's like 2,500 of the 3,000. And you would think that this is technology that should not be difficult to replicate or something, but I've dealt with dozens of such software systems, and 11 of them suck. And I would never, ever want to impose on my worst enemy that they should use these systems. I don't know why. I don't know why people can't make them good. There's one place, MSP, that makes a product called EditFlow. It's universally used by mathematicians because you just one click, you're right at the paper. It's obvious where to click to say, yes or no, or send it to a referee or whatever. I don't know why they solved this problem and others haven't. Maybe that price will also come down, but right now that's at $2,500 a year, and we're very happy to pay it. So beyond that, it's like hosting online is the other 500. So it's like, so in terms of what it should cost today to distribute, to aggregate, evaluate, and distribute science in general, this is not solely for mathematics, is $3,000, I think, if you're using this software. And again, I would like that number to come even further down. What you get when you get to that number is also very, very interesting. Oh, there's one more before I move on. There's one more really important piece, I think, which is that if no one's doing this for their commercial benefit, what's to stop the editor from just getting bored and not replying to emails? You would like to think, okay, the person who starts the journal is probably really committed to it, but then that person's going to pass it on to somebody else, and they'll pass it on to somebody else. Why? It's a very fragile chain if there's not a profit motive. It's very important to incentivize people to do the things that they do, and so in theory, we're already being paid by our universities, and we're not doing this. Even the commercial ones, they give you some, nice honorarium, like $3,000 a year for all this work. I would actually, if I counted the number of hours that I worked for commercial publishers and divided that by divided what the honorarium they give me, it's actually, like below minimum wage or whatever. Yeah. So no, thanks, but no thanks. I appreciate it, but that's not a rate limiting step for me to work on this. I work on this because I think it's important, because I think it's part of my academic responsibility. So I think it's very important that there not just be existing journals out there in the ether, but there be an overarching organization responsible for overseeing these various journals. And the probability that both the organization goes AWOL and the journal's editors go AWOL simultaneously is much lower than either one. And so that's kind of the longevity piece of it. It's too fragile, I think, just to have people starting journals on their own willy-nilly. People do that kind of thing. But I think it's good to have an overarching organization that does it. And so that's where the AMR comes in. There's in the U.S. there's the American Mathematical Society, but they started publishing before the internet age, and so their journals, all but one, are not Diamond Open Access because they're still printing and shipping them. And if they wanted to stop doing that, they would have to fire a whole bunch of staff. And even if I was made king of the AMS, I wouldn't do it, right? So there's sort of structural things that make legacy organizations, they're hardships to steer. And so if you bring in a new organization, they can start looking at this problem from scratch and saying, guys, what are we doing? Just do it like this. It costs nothing, and you get the same quality product, and everybody gets to read the science without needing to log in or go through some annoying process. So it's so obvious a posteriori that it's shocking that it took, so long, and it's still not solved, but I think we're making some good strides.
So your view is this is now in place. You've got the overseeing entity, and you've got the ability for people to flip from maybe other settings into this. But the goal, you put in place the infrastructure to basically, if I do want to start a new journal or someone gets frustrated with the old model and want to bring their editorial team, they can very quickly do so, right?
That's right.
Yeah. Over time, the hope is that more of these become actually freely available for both, which is the end state, which is the greater good, right?
Exactly right. It's just, I was the editor-in-chief of a journal called Experimental Mathematics. And at some point I was traveling and I needed to look at some paper that we had just published. And I went on the website and I couldn't get into it myself. Like they're asking me for $40. And I'm like, this is so insane. Please, there has to be a better way.
It's good. It's there's something, I don't know if there's something in you, Alex, but you find these things and you seem to go deep, right? There's no I'll just let someone else figure it out. There seems to be a good level of ownership.
I mean, mathematics is all about problem solving. And if you see a problem and you can solve it, there are lots of problems that I'd love to work on, but I don't think I have an in. I don't think I have an edge where I can do something where other people aren't doing, aren't making progress. And so there just so happen to be a small number of problems where I think I can actually make a contribution. And then I don't see why, none of this stuff takes up all that, well, yes, it does take up a lot of my time, but I protect my research time as well. But these things aren't hard and they're obvious, and it's shocking to me that I have to say it. Like, this should already be in existence, and I should just be able to, piggyback off of somebody else doing it. And I don't know why I'm stuck doing it, but so be it. It's yeah.
One more specific question on this, right? I read the paper, and it's not that, it's 6-7 papers. It's a nice summary, right, and very easy to read. There was one gaping gap. Gaping gap is probably the wrong word, but why is formalization not part of that? Because when I speak to professors again and lecturers, a big kill on their time is peer review, and they all, at least the dozens we've spoken to, talk about the peer review bottleneck and where do we get time to do anything else. But in the paper, you don't talk about formalization unless I glossed over it. Why is that not something, to me, as an obvious, well, maybe it's coming in your roadmap, but if you can do formalization of all these papers pre-publication, the time save is huge, right?
Well, you would think so. And there's a very good reason to separate out formalization from the diamond open access story. I mean, one is just to not overload the brain with too many things to think about at once.
Okay.
Let's solve one problem, which is we have these journals, whether they're all formalized or not, we still want to do them diamond open access. The second is I actually talk about journal publishing in that other paper that you mentioned, the Shape of Math to Come, and the rationale. Well, so in fact, when I was editor-in-chief of Experimental Math, we ran a special issue back in 2022, before this was really becoming mainstream, about the state of formalization as it currently exists. And I thought that the job of an editor would be incredible when you fast forward 20 years and every paper is fully formalized, because all you do is you look at the paper, you just say, yes, it's formalized. You give it to an editor. The editor can glance at it for a minute and say, yeah, that's an interesting and important result. We should definitely publish this. That's it. It takes, like 3 weeks and an hour, the 3 weeks being by the time your editor actually gets around to looking at your email, and an hour to look at the paper and say, yeah, it's good. The formalization checks out. Done. Accept this, right? Instead of having, right now, the way it works is it's basically 3 months and an hour for someone to look at it and say, yes, you should go to full refereeing for this. And then the refereeing could take 12 months, 16 months, whatever. Like for a hard paper, it can really take 2 years for somebody to find the time to go through it, pause what they're doing, however many other things they're supposed to be refereeing, and so on. It's a very delicate process, and it's what's the opposite of foolproof? It's extremely fragile. Like it's just full of, the referee is not expected to catch every technical detailed mistake. They're supposed to look at the big picture. If they can catch a technical detailed mistake, that's amazing. But the reality is that, the responsibility of the paper lies with the author, not with the referees for catching mistakes. The author needs to be saying only things that they think are absolutely are absolutely correct, which is the big difference between LLMs and human beings. LLMs are trying to say something that sounds extremely plausible, whereas human beings are trying to say something that's extremely correct. Okay, so that's why I think LLMs on their own need to be supercharged by formalization. But we can come back to that in a minute. To circle back to publication, so I really thought that formalization would solve all our massive backlog issues. And the fact that it's not really, the backlog is once it's accepted, how long does it take to publish? I mean, once it's submitted to published, why does it take so long? And the answer is no. Because even papers that are submitted together with a a formal certificate that the mathematics is correct, you still have to go through the formalization and understand whether what is being said in the natural language has exactly this, if the semantic understanding matches what has been done formally. And that's very subtle, very time consuming, especially if people are writing their own definitions for things. If they're stating their theorems, did they state it exactly correctly with exactly the same meaning as was declared in the natural language and so on. So refereeing is still, it's not a complete panacea. It'll help an awful lot. There's an awful lot of junk that will not go through because of formalization, but still the refereeing process, it's not going to be a week and a day.
Fine. And arguably, I guess, with something like Lean, then it creates an even bigger bottleneck because there's not, the expertise is maybe even fewer than it would be without, right?
That's right. Okay. That's right. Hopefully over time that will improve. Hopefully Mathlib will grow and more definitions become standardized, and then we don't have to check your definition because you're using the Mathlib definition.
That makes sense. That's a nice segue. You're also on the board of strategic board of Lean, and I guess what drew you to that? Again, another feather in your bow of the many hats you wear. So what drew you to that, and to take on a leadership or oversight role too?
Yeah, I got into formalization around 2019, I think. Basically, I mean, I saw a talk of Kevin Buzzard's, and I thought what he was doing was cool. It's funny because I've heard of formalized theorem provers for a long time before that. In fact, I was at the special year at the IAS when Voevodsky was running a whole year on formalized mathematics. This was in Coq, this wasn't in Lean, but the homotopy type theory was sort of all the rage. And I would have lunch with these guys every day, and they'd say, "Oh yeah, we're proving this theorem in the computer." And I was like, "Okay, sure, great. Good for you. I'll just go to my office and close the door and work on my theorems." I had no interest in it whatsoever, and of course, I was wrong and they were right. So what really drew me to the subject of formalization in particular was the feeling like. So I'm an analytic number theorist, and a lot of our papers, this is not unique to analytic number theory, but in particular, we have these like long papers, 60 pages, 100-page papers. It'll have 20 lemmas in it. Those lemmas have a dozen parameters, and all the parameters are sort of moving around at once, and you have to keep track of all of these things, and at the very end, they all have to perfectly zipper up and synthesize, and then you get a theorem. And I always found, like, if I have to do some annoying algebraic calculation, I'll do it on paper once because I need to understand what's really happening. But, if I do it again, I'll get a different answer. And if I do it again, I'll get a slightly different answer. And so what I'll do is once I do it once, then I put it into Mathematica. I go to a computer algebra system once and for all. Yes, that's the answer. I don't have to recheck this. Boom. I write it down. It's in the paper. It's right. Why can't I do that for my lemmas? Why do I have to recheck my lemmas again and again and again? And lay out, if it's, I have an entire desk where I lay out all the papers if I'm trying to work through a complicated argument where I need to see that lemma's over there, this lemma's over here. Like, did I miss something about how it moves from that lemma to that lemma, whatever. And so there has to be a better way, right? There's got to be a better mousetrap for algebra, doing what I can do with algebra and a computer algebra system, I should be able to do with lemmas. And I saw Kevin's talk and said, oh, beautiful. I'm going to start using Lean, and it'll speed up my workflow because I'll just formalize my lemmas as I go, and then I'll be able to do a lot more research that way. That's not how it works. Formalization is really, really hard, really time-consuming. Every last detail needs to be checked, and that's not what we do when we do natural language math. And so that's where you get to the beauty of being able to work with AI systems and formal systems, where all of the technicalities, at least in theory, should be handled under the hood without me bothering with it by AI or by automation in general, tactics. Lean already has all kinds of powerful tactics that do automation for you, but especially supercharged by AI systems, you get a lot more out of it.
Yeah, I saw your tweet, was it maybe a few months ago, on your train ride from down to Washington. It was the Covering Spaces project. I mean, that made it seem like your Lean, your symbiosis of man and machine is pretty fluent, and it just seemed like a great example of it working well together. But I think the likelihood is the blueprint you designed and the prior work you done had made the output very, very good. Is that I guess, is that a good example where it works well, and is there a lot of frustrating examples where it doesn't work as well?
Yeah, so if you just told, if I put some complicated paper into Codex and said formalize this, the probability that it does it is zero. The reason it worked in that case, I think, I was shocked that it worked. I really was not expecting it to be able to finish the whole project. Maybe I should back up to say what the project was. So it was some theorem, I would say at an advanced undergrad, maybe master's level mathematics theorem that a colleague, Jean Bourgain, and I decided just for fun that we would formalize. We wrote out a long blueprint, meaning a natural language, in excruciating detail, what the natural language statements are. And then the first third of it, we finished basically by hand, the old-fashioned way of looking up what the theorem is and trying to. And I'm still iterating at that point with AI just to say, how do I even say what a covering space is? Go look up how this is done in Mathlib, or it's not in Mathlib. Okay, so how should we say it? What are the fields that we should populate? What's an easy way to prove this theorem? I'm constantly talking to AI systems for how to do it, but then I'm manually doing it because what it says isn't quite right, yada, yada. We got about a third of the way through the project by hand. Then that particular morning, and this was very slow, just leisurely, we're meeting like for an hour a month kind of thing. Yeah. That morning, I turned on Codex for the first time. Now, I'd been using Claude almost exclusively. Claude had been my go-to system. And I tried putting into Codex, it was the VS Code extension or whatever.
Yeah.
And I just said, okay, here's the first sorry in our list, or not even a sorry. Here's the natural language that doesn't have a corresponding formal statement yet. What do you propose for the formal statement? And it proposed, it thought for 5 minutes, and then it came 5 minutes, not instantaneously. It really thought, and it came back with what it thought was a good formal statement. I looked at it. I think that's right. So I said, okay, well, it's a statement with a sorry. Could you fill in the sorry? It thinks for 7 minutes, and it comes back and says, here it is. And it's right. And I'm like, hot damn, okay, let's do the next one. And so we spent, 2 hours playing like this, and basically maybe there were 1 or 2 things that I had to give it slight corrections on. And in those 2 hours, we got another 30% of the way through the project. So like we made as much progress in those 2 hours as we had since the start of the project. In terms of the number of lines of code written, I think it's that first 30% that set everything up in just the right way that was the crucial thing that the systems are still having difficulty with. And then, as you said, once I got on the train, I just said, let it rip. If I'm really not doing all that much, maybe you can finish it by yourself. What I told it is, go as far down as you can, and then when you get confused, ping me and let's see if I can help you. And I said, go. And then I closed that tab and I started working on something else, and I sort of forgot about it. An hour later, I looked back, and in 47 minutes, it had stopped, and it said, yeah, I didn't have any trouble. Here's the final formalization. So I was just, blown away. It asks all kinds of questions about, is this how we want to do things? While you're formalizing something, you learn so much more about what's actually going on in that argument. So formalization includes a very important component of redigesting the argument, rethinking about every little step. Is there a smarter way to do this? What's really going on here? And we basically bypassed all of that. So you absolutely lose something by letting the AI just do it for you. On the other hand, it's done. So it's very tempting to just turn these systems on. But again, it's not a panacea. I do believe they'll be tremendously helpful, but they don't solve all of our problems.
Yeah, I mean, you're touching on now, like, we could go into some deep conversations that are appearing on Zulip, right? About
very much so
of where things are going. But before that, why is it, like, I don't know if you gave this statistic or read it somewhere else recently, but someone suggested 1% of mathematicians are using Lean today, or Lean plus AI. If it's so powerful, why is there not been that aha moment where every mathematician is like jumping into this head first?
So it's still really hard. It's really hard if you want to do something yourself. There have been a small number of really successful projects where someone just from the beginning said, hey, AI, here's my natural language theorem, go formalize it. And you iterate with it and iterate with it. And iterate doesn't mean you actually know any Lean. You just, kind of glance at it, and it seems like maybe this statement is doing what I think it's supposed to be doing. And you go back and forth, and in 2 weeks, it finishes the whole project. Fine. Well, that's great when that happens. There are relatively few fields where that could happen. And really, I think the vast majority of mathematicians aren't using it yet because it doesn't actually help with your research yet, except for very particular fields. And one of the reasons, maybe the main reason, is that it doesn't even yet know the basic definitions of the kinds of things that modern mathematicians want to be working on. And so if you can't expect it to come up with these definitions, because human beings would take, months and months to come up with them. Well, maybe that's not a good reason. Maybe it, in principle, should be able to eventually be able to come up with the definitions too, but right now it's just not good enough. And so the vast majority of mathematicians do not find it useful for their research yet, and they're right. It's not yet useful for their research, and so they're not using it.
So the tool needs to get a bit more easy to use or intuitive, and then you should see like more flip into usage. Is that it?
So several things have to happen. The Mathlib, or Lean in general, needs to look a lot more like what mathematicians are used to. But that's, I think, a small component of it. I think they'd be willing to start using it if they could state their theorems. So what really has to happen is that Mathlib needs to grow orders of magnitude larger than it currently is. But it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. So Mathlib needs to get better so that mathematicians will go and work on things formally. But for Mathlib to get better, mathematicians have to start working formally. So it's both a positive and a negative feedback loop, depending on which way it goes.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I think we're in the positive part right now. And more people are getting into it, or at least running experiments with it.
Yeah.
And hopefully that will accelerate the growth of Mathlib so that more and more people can actually start using it and maybe doing their research in it.
That leads nicely into the shape of math to come, which was your lovely paper on this whole area, right? And the future of maths. But I guess one very much a follow-on point to that, I think one of the core arguments is that natural language mathematics currently grows faster than Mathlib, and quasi-auto-formalization could flip that. So is the real bottleneck compute, model capability, or human taste, architectural coherence? So curious to get your thoughts on that. And, what does Mathlib look like when it does get to 10, 20 million lines from, was it 2 million today?
Yeah, that's a great question. I don't think anybody really knows what it's going to look like. But certainly a major bottleneck right now is we have human maintainers, and I think we should have human maintainers, who are overseeing mounds and mounds and mounds of PRs to Mathlib. A lot of them are by LLMs, and those LLMs do not write good code. They, just because they finished the project doesn't mean that it's the kind of quality that you want to let into Mathlib, because if you start letting bad quality code into Mathlib, now you have duplication. Now somebody says a theorem one way, another person says that a different way, and nobody catches it. And then much later, you have a clash. You create these diamonds where things are being constructed in multiple ways. So it's an extremely difficult, and at the moment not yet solvable by AI, problem to coordinate the size of Mathlib and have the library grow correctly, appropriately. Yeah. So, in fact, the latest, I guess it wasn't a paper, maybe it was just a blog post, that I put out was about, okay, we've sort of made, I wouldn't say solved auto-formalization, but we made an awful lot of progress. The next thing we need to do is get good at auto-canonization. Can we take a formalization and make it the canonical version, the version good enough to go into Mathlib? And in theory, there's nothing stopping systems from, I don't see an a priori reason why they can't eventually get good at it. It's just something people have to be aware is important and needs attention and needs resources.
That makes sense. I think maybe I don't want to misquote you, but you disagree with Christian Szegedy on the personal responsibility for formal statements. Is that a correct take in terms of mathematicians should be personally responsible for what they do? Is that still your kind of sentiment on it, or?
Oh, I definitely think that mathematicians should be personally responsible for anything that they put out with their name on it. I don't think Christian was saying they shouldn't be. Christian's point, the conversation we had that I think you're referring to is I was saying, well, the AI, you can't just cut AI loose to try to start auto-formalizing entire textbooks, because how do you know it got the definitions right? How do you know it got the theorem statements right? Maybe it's claiming it proved something, and you look carefully and you realize it's not actually proving what it thinks it's proving. And he said, but wait a second, in the long term, if you believe that mathematics exists in this Platonic external, it's a truth about the universe, and there is eventually, like mathematicians do eventually figure out what the right way to say something is, what the right definitions are, what the right concepts are. We do this. We make mistakes and we correct those mistakes over time. Why can't AI be allowed in the same way? Why does it have to get the right answer on the first try? It can have a wrong definition. It proves a theorem based on that definition. Maybe it proves a theorem that's too strong, and you're like, wait a second, that's not actually true. And then you look back and you say, oh, you had the wrong definition. Or it's struggling to prove theorems that shouldn't be all that hard, and the reason is it got the definition wrong or it got the theorem statement wrong. There's all kinds of misformalizations, especially in our Prime Number Theorem project, where we have a very dynamic interaction with human beings, AI, formalization systems. We are constantly getting expert formalizers who state who make the wrong statements. The statements that they make are literally false. And some system like Aristotle will come and say, here's a proof of the negation of the statement that you made. Okay, so it's very, very difficult in general for human beings and for AI systems to get the definitions and the statements right. But in the long term, what Christian is saying is it's okay if AI systems are getting those things wrong, because as long as you have a mechanism for refactoring and auto canonization and so on, then you can turn the system on, and over time, there'll be the periphery that it still has only preliminary versions of things, but then there'll be a core, an ever-growing core, where it really has come to the conclusion that this is the right way to say things, because you're able to do what you want with the statements that you've made and the definitions that you've made.
That makes sense. In terms of, you're obviously you work with startups, you're involved in much of the ecosystem around maths AI. I guess just a question from you, there's various, again, mutterings on Twitter about interacting with the math community in the right way. What would be the advice you would give, nascent startups?
We're currently figuring out how to live together. We've been, what was that MTV show where you put people... Cribs, yeah. Well, whatever the name. The point is, we were sort of thrust onto a similar ecosystem that we didn't anticipate. At least the mathematicians who were already in that ecosystem didn't anticipate this, and are now trying to figure out how to live with new neighbors. And one of the things that I think is frustrating to mathematicians is a mathematician will work on something for 30 years. They'll make some breakthrough that will be celebrated among mathematicians, which is some incremental thing, and it goes into the Annals of Mathematics, the top journal in the field, and 3 human beings on Earth can read that paper and appreciate it, and then some AI system, hits a button, waits 2 weeks, and then publishes a big Twitter thread that's written up in the New York Times. Oh, they managed to solve some Erdős problem or something, and it's like, that's not what we think of. So we have to be very careful, or mathematicians are much more careful about declaring something to be a breakthrough. And there's sort of rules. They're not written down. They're not enforced. There's not a math police. But there's like, what is or isn't a breakthrough is something that we in the community understand. And the sense in which these unwritten rules are enforced is you go to a conference and someone, starts saying, "Oh, I have this great result," and people are like, "No, you don't." We're very non-confrontational as a culture. So if someone is claiming things and you don't agree with them, you just don't invite them to your next conference. You ignore when a New York Times reporter emails you and says, "Can we talk about this result?" You just don't reply to their request for a meeting. I'm not going to go out there and say, no, this person is wrong and what they're saying is nonsense. Whereas AI companies are just jumping one after the other to say, I auto-formalize this and I solved this major problem. It's like, no, that's not a major problem. And no, you didn't solve it. And so there's this like...
the PR hype.
It's the PR hype and the fact that, hype takes off, and what's the old saying? Truth is just tying his shoelaces or something. Right, so the mathematicians are like starting to tie their shoelaces, and and the hype is just going in all directions. And in fact, that's one of the things that we tried to do. I was just an organizer on a conference at ICERM last week, where a bunch of mathematicians got together and said, "What do we want? If we can carefully articulate what ecosystem we actually want to exist, then that's a way of setting down what the rules are, at least as far as the individuals who came together at this meeting. We think that these are some of the rules we try to follow as mathematicians, and we would encourage AI companies to their best of their ability, follow these rules and not do things like, if there's a PhD student working on a project and they're working on that project collectively, so it's all public what they're doing, and then an AI company swoops in and says, great, we finished your project for you, here it is. It's like, well, that's nice in the sense of the research of whether it could be done. And there was no question about whether it could be done. Of course, it can be done. It's like the AI company takes the hype, and then the graduate student is still left kind of cleaning up the mess, because it still has not been written in the right level of generality, to the right, using the right...
The dead-end formalization, right? Does that sort of...
Kind of, yeah. It kills that direction, So it can have a negative impact on the community to have these things. You would think, like, okay, let them have their hype. It's like, no, it actually takes away... resources, but not in the sense of money, in the sense of prestige and what constitutes a finished product. You know, this graduate student is going to take another year and finish the project properly, and then say, wait a second, didn't the AI company do this a year ago? It's like, now I have to, have this conversation again. So
the advice would be more thoughtful and it's hard. Yeah, not that I'm saying it's hard for these startups who've raised lots of money, but I guess they're trying to balance sending their investors a nice PR spin and
exactly,
and it's, I guess there's maybe I don't see them changing their tact anytime soon.
Right. The incentives are misaligned because the AI company wants to, as quickly as possible, come out and say, hey, we can solve this. Our system does this. Give us more money and we'll do even more. Invest in us. Right. That's literally what I would do if I was such a company. That's the obvious thing. What we as mathematicians need to do is not just play defense. And we don't even play defense. We just play, we're not going to show up for this game because we don't like this game. We have to start taking some more
proactiveness, almost, is it right?
Exactly. Proactive measures to say this is what we think would be a valuable contribution. This would not be a valuable contribution. If we can set the ground rules better.
So this is what ICERM was last week, right? This is
exactly.
I don't know if it was a conference or more of a closed door event.
It was a workshop. Yeah.
Okay. Can you share maybe two or three of the milestones, or is it still secretive, or is it like?
It's not secretive, but it's being worked on, and I don't want to get ahead of the organizers. And yeah, pretty soon we'll be able to come out with what people came up with during that week.
Okay, but it was a productive meeting around what some of these what the math community thinks are good milestones, and then if people can do these off the list, then great. That's progress, and that's the direction you see as positive.
I think just anything where we get to lay down the ground rules is already positive. Whatever those ground rules are, let's have some rules. Let's not play Calvin ball, where you just can change the rules on the fly and whatever goes. And let's articulate what we actually want out of this ecosystem with our new neighbors.
That makes sense. I will make one small observation, but looking at some of your tweets, it's like you do seem to balance, here's one side of the argument with here's another side of the arguments, and trying to maybe sit in the middle a bit. Do you see that as part of your role? It's sort of like shepherding kind of the two communities, or?
I think in general, life has no solutions, it's trade-offs. And so if you don't know what both sides are, then you don't know what you're trading off for what. And so I try to make decisions as much as possible by looking at both sides of the ledger and articulating both sides of the ledger to the best of my ability. And then as long as we know what both sides are, then we can make an informed decision. But just saying, here's the reason why you should do this, and not saying, well, here are all the possible ways that it'll fail, I think is a mistake.
That's some good self-reflection. I think everyone could probably benefit from that too. Cool. I'm gonna close with a tweet from June 2020. What will math research look like in 20 years? I have no idea, and I'm pretty sure I'm not alone. Will interactive theorem provers, e.g. Lean, be the next phase in math evolution? Maybe, maybe not. Obviously, fast forward 6 years. Putting that same question to you, how has that evolved? and 20 years from now, what does it look like?
Yeah, I guess I would still say maybe, maybe not, although I'm much thicker on the maybe. Yeah, I mean, what's been happening is exactly what we would hope would be happening. Maybe not at exactly the same way, but I'm delighted by the tools that people have built, and I think it's going to be there's going to be a golden era where AI and formalization allow us to prove theorems that we wouldn't have dreamed possible in our lifetimes. I think that era is not here yet, but I think it's coming. And the real question is what happens after that. But that's a whole other, does mathematics no longer become something that mathematicians do? If I ask GPT any problem that I want to think about and it gives me the answer immediately, what does that mean? So that's a whole other, conversation and philosophical debate and so on. And we got into a little bit of that last week with some people saying, I would not want to do mathematics anymore if that's what it became. And others saying, no, I still want to know the answer. How do you solve this problem? Okay, fine. There's some oracle that'll tell me the solution. It's no longer just me pounding away finding the solution myself. I obviously the best experience is doing it yourself and standing on top of that cliff and looking down and knowing that you did it. But if someone makes a tank that can drive you up there, okay, someone drove you up there, but you can still look up or look down and see how far you've come and what you've learned. So
do you still think those creative leaps will be human leaps? I guess
they may not.
I'm optimistic. Okay, yeah, okay, fair.
They may not. Because anytime I've tried to articulate explicitly what is something that I can do that AI systems will never be able to do, not what they can or can't do now. There's plenty I can say that they can't do well now, but something that they'll never be able to do, I always come up short. I'm not able to articulate what it is that I do that these systems won't ever be able to do.
I like to think, was it Robert, the moon conjectures, a Fields medalist in the late 90s, a South African English guy. His name evades me right now.
You mean Borchards, who solved the moonshine?
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, Richard Borchards, yeah.
I was just reading on him lately, and the moment he points to when that happened was he was doing a bus trip in Kashmir, and there was a landslide in the road, and he got off the bus, and in this 24 hours when he was waiting around, he had the penny dropped, and it's the unconscious mind. I don't know. It feels like there's a human power in that, and the at least I'd like to think that that's going to endure for a lot longer. But you can harness that with some of the tools and technology emerging. Maybe that's the optimist in me. I don't know.
Yeah, we'll see. It's going to be a very interesting. It's already been a very interesting couple of years, and it's only more to come.
Thank you very much for your time, and excited to see developments and follow your Twitter updates over the coming months. Thanks, Alex.
My pleasure. Nice chatting with you. Thanks.